would say it actually began when I was about, if we're talking about drawing, like in general, I would,
Like visual arts in general.
yeah, I would say it started when I was like maybe 5 or 6. My older sister, she's about like 7 years older than me. So when I was a kid, like I would just learn a lot of things from what she was doing in school, because she used to do arts in school. And I think that one of the first few things that I used to try and draw was like the cartoons that I was watching. So I would draw a lot of like Pokémon, Dragon Ball-Z, Digimon, that sort of thing. Because for me, what I really liked about drawing was that like I always wanted to have posters in my room, but my parents wouldn't buy the posters. So I was like, okay, cool, I'll just make my own. So I would just draw them. And I think that's primarily like what made me really like start drawing, and I would just draw a lot. And then I just enjoyed it and carried on doing it. And sometimes I would take those drawings to school. So I remember this one time, I had this flip file with like a whole bunch of drawings, and I brought it to school, showed my friend, and my friend was like, oh, these are really cool. And I think we were at aftercare, and like basically whilst he was looking at them, just like different kids just like saw them. And I just remember there was just like a crowd of kids around me like looking at my drawings. And I was like, oh, this is a cool feeling. Like people just looking at like your drawings. And it was just like Dragon Ball-Z drawings. It was just like drawings of like Goku and Piccolo and stuff. But just like the idea that, you know, people were interested in seeing stuff that I made, like, you know, in my own free time as a kid. I think I was about like 7 or 8 when that happened. And ever since then, I was kind of like hooked to that feeling, like, oh yeah, I can actually kind of communicate with people in this way. Like if I make stuff, people want to actually engage with it, kind of thing. Because I was always like a really quiet kid. I wasn't really a very outgoing person. So for me, it was just really interesting that me as the quiet kid all of a sudden has all of this attention on him and all of these eyes on him. When meanwhile, I'm kind of usually the person just in the back that you don't really notice. You might forget that I'm even there, you know? So I think that stuck with me, that like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not the loudest person or the most talkative person, but this is the way that I speak, this is the way I communicate with the world, I guess. So ever since I was like really young, it's just been something I did.
There's so many like follow-up like thoughts that I have to that response, but I guess the one that I'm gonna stick with is like when those kids were gathered around you, did that sort of feel like I'd say impromptu exhibition, but obviously you wouldn't have called it that at the time.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about it now, I'm like, oh, was that like my first exhibition? You know, like even though it wasn't planned or it wasn't formal in any sense of the word, it was just the idea of exhibiting your work in front of an audience. That's exactly what happened, you know. So yeah, when I think about it now, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what I do now, you know. Like I show work to people, whether it's online or in exhibitions. Even as a musician, like there's always an audience involved, you know. You're always showing work to people, and I think that's the first time I even found out about that. I didn't really know what an exhibition was at the time, but like, yeah, I think that would definitely be the first time that I had an exhibition.
So what are we looking at now when people look at your work? What are we seeing? Like, what are we gazing at? What are you trying to show us?
That's an interesting question, because sometimes I don't know what I'm trying to show, you know? And like, a lot of the time, like you're encouraged as an artist to, you know, like speak about your intention and stuff. And sometimes it's a little bit difficult to articulate that, because it's just something that I feel inside that I really want to do. And I guess the best way for me to answer that is to just say that like I just want to like express or just like reflect on things that I've seen in my life or things that interest me, things that I think are cool. And yeah, I think it's very similar to how I got into music. Like I used to throw parties, I still do, but like when I started throwing parties, what I noticed was like, well, first before I threw the parties, I would go out and I noticed that a lot of the stuff that I was listening to and that my friends were listening to wasn't being played at the parties. So I was like, let me throw parties that actually include the things that I'm into and the things that my friends are into. And so for me, like with art, it's also like that, where it's like, oh, I actually have a perspective on the world too that I think people would be interested in. And there's like stuff that maybe, you know, I relate to that I don't really see as much, or I don't really see getting the same attention as other artists. So I'm just like, okay, well, let me see if, you know, I can just create that lane for myself and for people maybe who are like me. Because I've just been inspired by, I was inspired by like seeing, because obviously I was a musician before, and like getting into art, I was inspired by seeing that like, oh, well, so many of my homies are doing really well in this, and I feel like I can do it too. So like, it's very easy to stand on the sideline and say, I can do it too, but then you don't do it. So I was like, man, let me just actually lean into it. Let me actually show that I can do it, you know, put your money where your mouth is, and show that you have this interesting perspective that you speak of, you know. So yeah, I think it's interesting. As to what I'm trying to say, I'm not really sure, but you know, it's a reflection on how I see the world as a Black person. So I think I try to include ideas of like race, class, politics, in very nuanced ways, you know. Even the idea of, because this is like basically a recycled piece of cardboard, even the actual materials that I use, the medium, is also part of the politics. It's a part of the story, because like traditionally, you know, in painting you would expect someone to paint on canvas. But then when I started painting, I didn't really have money to be buying canvases, and I wasn't really sure how serious I was going to be about being an artist, like full time or just professionally. So I was like, man, I have all these cardboard boxes, let me just cut them up, shape them, and paint on them, and just draw and do whatever, you know. And I think that also is a part of my story, because it's like, that speaks about like a class thing, you know, where it's like, how many people are in that situation where they have a talent, but they don't have the means to actually access the field, you know, like the means, like to afford the resources for canvases and paints and things like that, you know. So for me, I was like, let me find a way, like a way to access this field. I'm just gonna get some paint this side. Yeah, I was like, let me find a way to access this field. I can't afford the canvases, but I have these cardboard boxes, so let me just paint on them. It's like, you can get the same sort of ideas across, so why not? And then I think that also became a part of the story that I was telling, that like the story of accessibility within the art world, the story of kind of being the outsider, you know, the guy who didn't go to art school, trying to find a way to kind of sneak in, you know, like a wolf amongst the sheep, you know. You're in this exhibition where everybody's got these expensive canvases and your work is on cardboard, but that itself is a story to tell, because it's a reflection of maybe a perspective that you have, you know. Yeah, so I think that for me, what I'm really trying to say is that a lot of it is also process based. A lot of it has to do with the actual materials, and through that I think that I'm trying to say something, but it is also a little bit open to interpretation.
What are you doing now?
I'm just cleaning this brush with some turpentine, because I was painting, so I recently finished that painting there.
Yahoo boys.
Yeah, so with that one, the Yahoo boys are the scammers. So it's like the email scammers, you know. So that's where the Yahoo pod comes from. It's like I guess like a term for like scammers in Nigeria who use like email scams and stuff like that, like sending you emails to say like, oh, you know, it's not really like the 419 scams. I think with the Yahoo boys, the modern way is like, let's say they hack your email, right? And then let's say someone sends you an invoice, or you send an invoice, and then they've hacked your email. So then what they do is they'll like take that invoice, change the bank details, and then they'll pretend that they're you, and they send it back and be like, oh, sorry, the bank details were incorrect, can you just change it? And then the money gets sent to you, and you won't even notice because they emailed it from your account, and they won't notice because it's from your account. So that's what like the Yahoo boys do. So I was like watching a documentary about Hush Puppy. I don't know if you know about Hush Puppy, but he was a big scammer, big time scammer. He was on Instagram, I think a couple 100,000 followers, if not 1 million followers. And like this guy was just like, he was living that lifestyle, man, like that Yahoo boy lifestyle, like flaunting his wealth, you know, Versace, Gucci, everything, living in Dubai. And everybody thought it was legit. And then, you know, eventually people found out like, you know, this guy's actually a big scammer. So he got arrested. And I just watched a documentary about him, and I was just like really fascinated by his story and the Yahoo boys. Also the name Yahoo boys just sounds hard. Like it was like, I was like, yeah, you know what I mean? And it's like, I don't know, there's something about scammers that I kind of like resonate with, you know, in a sense. Like there's something about, I don't know, there's something about criminals that I resonate, but like not like violent criminals. I mean like people who are like hustlers, where it's like you're trying to find a way to make it in a world that's like hard, you know what I mean? And yeah, you're committing crimes, but it's like sometimes when you listen to these people, you can kind of understand like where they're coming from, because it's like there's a lack of opportunities out there for people, and I can resonate with someone who feels like, man, you know, I gotta get it. However, I gotta get it by any means, man. Right now, I'm painting. You know what I mean? Like I'm an artist. Like I understand that. Like I gotta get it somehow, man. Like I don't have a job, my G. You know what I mean? So it's like I gotta also find a way to make it in this world, and it's not getting any easier for anyone, you know. Bro, it's like a hustler economy. You just gotta do what you can.
Like I always find it interesting, like when an artist is within the audio and the visual.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think your sonic abilities give you an upper hand or an advantage when it comes to your visual artwork? Has music ever inspired painting, that sort of stuff?
That's interesting. I think that maybe not necessarily music itself, but like my experience as a musician, like just career-wise, and my perspective on the world and how I express that through music, I think that that's helped me a lot to figure out what I'm actually doing. So I think that like visually my work is quite similar to the music that I make. It's like almost, it could be a visual component to a lot of the music that I make. So I think that it's helped me in terms of building a sort of world in which my ideas exist and make sense to me. So I would say it's just the experiences that I've had as a musician. They've really helped me a lot as an artist.
Will we ever like get an experience from Jakinda where it's like a project that encapsulates both your audio and the visual stuff?
Maybe, yeah, I think maybe. The thing that I really grown to appreciate about my career and just my life is that I'm always kind of trying new things. I'm always, I wouldn't say reinventing myself, but I'm always experimenting and kind of moving into the next phase of my life. So I think that for me, yeah, it's very possible that that could be something that I end up doing at some point. There's so many things that I want to try and do. So yeah, you know, you never know. At this stage, anything is possible.